There's somebody there. Don't worry, it's only a story. Good evening, archivists, and welcome back to Dreamland Encounters. I'm Raven, and tonight we're exploring alien and UFO stories. Time to relax, get comfortable, and journey into the archives. The night that changed everything happened in the summer of 2016. I was living in Clearwater, Florida, working part-time at a local bar while trying to launch a freelance career. My life was about to take an unexpected turn. A typical work night turned extraordinary. While cleaning up after my shift, I found myself staring out at the water. The night was crystal clear, with stars visible through the city lights. That's when I saw them. 3 lights moving in a perfect triangle. Far too high in the sky to be normal aircraft. These weren't ordinary lights, they moved differently, dancing around each other in an impossible formation. Like synchronized swimmers in the sky, they shifted positions with an eerie precision. Too bright to be normal, they seemed to reflect off the ocean. Yet no light source was visible. Something kept me rooted to the spot. I watched for what felt like hours, unable to look away. Suddenly, they shot straight up, vanishing without a trace. When I finally checked my phone, no one else had reported seeing anything unusual. It was as if I was the only witness. That night, sleep was impossible. Something about the experience felt deeply wrong. More than just seeing lights in the sky, it felt like I was being watched. The dreams began the next night. I'd never been much of a dreamer, but these were different. They felt like memories, yet not quite memories. In one vivid dream, I stood in the middle of a desert, huge white lights hovering above me. Strangely, I felt calm, almost as if the lights were somehow familiar. Years later, the experience still haunts me. Something has stayed with me. A persistent feeling that something extraordinary happened that night. Even without a direct encounter since, I can't shake the sense that something fundamental changed. I still feel like something hasn't left me, even though years have passed since that night in Clearwater. In the depths of my dreams, something wasn't right. I kept experiencing intense nightmares where I felt strapped to a table, surrounded by unseen presences studying me, probing my thoughts. I'd wake up drenched in cold sweat, deeply convinced these weren't ordinary dreams but vivid memories of something real. The lingering sensation of mysterious lights hovering just beyond my reach haunted me. A feeling I couldn't shake even weeks later. To avoid seeming crazy, I stopped discussing these experiences with anyone. But the dreams continued, growing increasingly vivid and detailed. Then one night, while smoking on my balcony, I saw them again. 3 lights forming a perfect triangle, hovering low near the water's surface. Something massive cast a shadow across the bay, and I felt an inexplicable pull toward it. Before I could process what was happening, the lights vanished, plunging me into darkness. Days later, something chilling caught my attention. 2 men in black suits stood across the street from my building, completely out of place in our laid-back Clearwater community. One was bald, the other had dark hair. They weren't talking or engaging with anyone, just staring ahead with an unnerving intensity. These men seemed to be constantly watching me. Wherever I moved, they repositioned themselves, always remaining within my peripheral vision. If I entered a store, they'd wait outside. Their presence felt endless, though in reality it might have been just a couple of weeks. They never spoke to me directly. Yet their message was crystal clear. We know that you know, and you'd better stay quiet. I'd heard rumors about men in black before, but never believed them until now. Something fundamental had shifted in my understanding of reality, and I knew my world would never be the same. Years have passed since that night in Clearwater, but the experience has never truly left me. I've tried to move on, changing jobs and even countries, hoping to shake off the unsettling memories. But something fundamental shifted that night, a deep, unexplainable transformation that continues to haunt me. Sometimes in mundane moments, standing in a grocery line or sitting in a crowded coffee shop, I'll suddenly feel watched. The sensation is visceral. My neck prickles and my eyes dart to the room's corners, searching for something I can't see. The dreams still come, though less frequently now. I'll wake up drenched in sweat, that overwhelming feeling of something hovering just above me burned into my consciousness. It's like a permanent scar on my psyche, impossible to erase no matter how hard I try. When I close my eyes, those bright lights over Clearwater's water still flicker in my memory. And deep down, I know they'll return. Maybe not tonight, maybe not next year, but they're coming. I've been marked somehow. I can't determine if this is pure paranoia or something real, but I know one thing with absolute certainty. Whatever happened in Clearwater changed me forever. I will never be the same person I was before that night. My journey began with a week-long road trip across the Southwest. Just me, my dog Rufus, and an open road leading nowhere specific. Starting in Arizona, I meandered through New Mexico, passing through Albuquerque and Santa Fe. The desert's vast, empty landscape has a way of expanding your mind, opening you to possibilities. It was dusk when I found myself on a 2-lane road outside Roswell, far from the main highway. Hours of driving had followed the sun's descent, watching the sky transform from purple to dark blue. That's when I saw them. Not car headlights or a distant city's glow, but something else entirely. Bright, white lights that seemed to pulse, almost breathing, suspended in the twilight. Miles of empty sand and scrub surrounded me. The farmhouse or construction site seemed out of place with nothing else in sight. I pulled over, sensing something odd, maybe a hidden solar panel area. Rufus wasn't his usual calm self. He growled low, a rumbling sound deep in his chest. His hair stood on end, and he stared into the desert, watching something I couldn't see. This was unsettling. Curiosity pulled me forward despite my unease. The lights were strange. They hung suspended in the air, at least 20 feet off the ground, hovering without any visible support. No vehicles, no wind, no sound, just these lights. As I approached, a pressure built behind my eyes, causing a dull ache. Suddenly, something shifted. A thought entered my mind, not a voice, but a communication beyond words. It felt familiar yet foreign, like a whispered understanding. The message was simple. Stay calm. We're not here to harm. My pulse raced. I wanted to run, but couldn't move. My feet felt rooted to the ground. Behind me, Rufus whined, frozen in a trance-like state, staring at the lights. Then it emerged from the shadows, a tall, thin figure with impossibly long limbs, moved with an unsettling, liquid-like motion. It didn't touch the ground so much as shift through space. The outline was dark, its face obscured, but its movement made my stomach churn. Another thought came, stronger and clearer. We are not what you think we are. In that moment, everything changed. One message felt like I was inside my head, something erasing the edges of my thoughts. I stood there, watching, existing in a moment that seemed to stretch endlessly. I didn't have eyes as I understood them, but I could feel its focus on me and Rufus. Something in my gut screamed to get out, but when I tried to move, I couldn't. My legs were frozen, as if superglued to the ground. The air pressed down on my chest, thick and heavy. Panic started to rise, then suddenly the pressure lifted. But this time, my movement wasn't my own. I was being drawn closer to that thing in the desert, almost against my will. My thoughts went blank. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. My voice swallowed by the night with no one around to hear it anyway. The next thing I remember, I was sitting in my truck with headlights on, gripping the wheels so tightly my knuckles were white. It took me a minute to understand what had happened. The lights were gone. The presence was gone. When I glanced at the dashboard clock, it hit me. Nearly 2 hours had passed since I first spotted the light, but I hadn't moved. The truck was exactly where I'd parked it. I couldn't remember how I'd gotten back. All I knew was this sensation of lost time, like someone had hit reset on those 2 hours. My phone showed nothing. No messages, just an eerie quiet that felt deeply wrong. The feeling of being watched lingered. I drove until I reached a small diner, sitting for half an hour, staring at my coffee. The waitress kept looking at me like I was crazy. Maybe I was, but every night since then, the lights keep appearing. Just before dark, sometimes far away, sometimes right at the edge of my vision. Blinking, pulsing, flickering like they're waiting for something. I've tried telling myself they're just headlights or a military test, but deep down I know different. I know better deep down. Something stopped me from going back that time I tried. I can't explain it clearly, but that spot in the desert feels untouchable, forbidden. Rufus has been okay since the incident, though he sleeps more than usual. Whenever we drive near that area, he gets nervous. He won't even look out the window, even though we're passing pretty far away. I simply can't go there. If I accidentally make a turn that leads us even slightly toward that place, he starts shaking and howling no matter how calm I try to be. Sometimes I wonder if I'm losing my mind. But then I remember Rufus's eyes, how terrified he was. How he seemed to sense something was wrong before I did. That cold pressure in my chest returns when I think about it, like something is still waiting just beyond the horizon. I'm not certain what happened to us out there, but one thing is certain. I'll never forget that night. The lights, the thing that wasn't human. Maybe I'll just stay away from New Mexico for a while, you know? I was on vacation in Japan last year, staying at an Airbnb near the Daigo Shrine in Kyoto. On my last night in town, around 11:40 p.m. on a Monday, I returned to my accommodation. I was completely sober and wide awake. The walkway to the shrine stretched about 3 city blocks long, 2 blocks wide on either side. Ditches lined the walls with alternating plant rows along the entire path. The walkway ran through the middle, with a museum on the right and the shrine and palace at the fork. As I walked, I noticed 2 kids hopping over the wall. I watched them jump down, then run across the path to the fork, where they stopped and waited. I was walking in a straight line, moving closer because that was the way to my Airbnb. When I made eye contact, I realized these weren't ordinary children. They were 3 to 4 feet tall, slim but proportionate, with larger heads and pointed ears. Their skin was as white as snow, with eyes as large as eye sockets, but completely different, transformed into something straight out of a sci-fi movie. It started with the dog barking furiously at something outside, not unusual, since raccoons often visit our trash. But these barks felt different, more urgent. I stepped onto the deck, feeling the cool night air against my skin. That's when I saw them. Bright lights zipping unpredictably across the sky. These weren't standard aircraft lights. They darted back and forth like they were playing some kind of aerial game. Gripping the railing, I watched in awe as my breath formed small clouds in the chilly air. The light show seemed to last forever, though it was probably just minutes. When the lights finally vanished over the horizon, an eerie silence descended. Even the dog stopped barking, staring into the darkness with a mix of curiosity and fear. This morning, fueled by excitement and caffeine, I explored the backyard, Among the drooping grass and bewildered garden gnomes, I discovered something unexpected: scattered metallic debris. These pieces were unlike anything I recognized, lightweight yet incredibly sturdy, with an iridescent sheen that seemed to shift colors depending on the viewing angle. I've been searching online trying to find if anyone else witnessed the lights or encountered similar debris. So far, no luck. Part of me wants to send the fragments to a university lab for analysis, but another part, the one influenced by too many conspiracy theory documentaries, suggests leaving it alone might be safer. For now, the debris sits in a box in my shed. I catch myself glancing out the window, half expecting government SUVs to roll up the driveway. But life continues. I go to work. I come home. And a mystery remains. I've lived in rural Ohio my whole life, and most nights are pretty ordinary. But that Wednesday in August 1994 was different. I was 11 years old, and something happened that would change everything. Our house stood isolated, with the nearest neighbors half a mile away. Our backyard stretched out to a vast cornfield, and my bedroom on the second floor had a large window facing those rows of corn. It was one of those sticky, hot nights where the air feels thick as soup. I'd just been allowed to watch the X-Files for the first time, much to my mother's disapproval. Around 10:30, I went to bed but couldn't sleep. The heat was oppressive. I lay watching the cornstalks sway in the darkness when something strange happened. The crickets went completely silent. In Ohio in August, that's not normal. The silence felt like a physical weight. Then came the lights. At first, a soft blue glow filtered through my window. I thought maybe my older brother was trying to scare me. But the light began to change. It started pulsing in a rhythm that made my teeth hurt and my vision blur. The color shifted from blue to a sickly green-white that made everything look alien and wrong. I wanted to call out, but I couldn't move. Something was physically holding me down. The air felt thick, like breathing underwater. My alarm clock flashed random numbers, and a low humming seemed to come from inside my head. That's when I saw the face, right outside my second-story window. This was no human face. It was too long, too angular. The eyes were enormous, silvery like mercury, with vertical pupils that kept changing size. Barely any nose, just two small slits. The mouth was a thin line wrapping almost entirely around its head. But the skin was what really got to me. I've never told this story outside my family. They always dismissed it as a nightmare or an overactive imagination. But I know what I saw that night, and I can't shake the feeling that something big might happen. That uncertainty is almost as unsettling as the memory itself. Saw it. The creature wasn't gray or green like you see in movies. Its skin was almost translucent, like a thin membrane where shadows of movement could be glimpsed underneath. A strange geometric pattern covered its surface, shifting and changing when viewed directly. For what felt like hours, though likely only minutes, I stared completely still, my head tilted at an impossible angle. In the darkness behind the figure, more shapes seemed to move, but I couldn't focus on them. Then it pressed its hand against the glass. Those fingers were wrong, too jointed, as if someone had redesigned a human hand with extra knuckles. Where it touched the window, frost began forming in the middle of a hot Ohio August. I must have blacked out. The next memory was my mum waking me up. I was on the floor near my bed, and the window stood wide open, something my parents always kept locked because of my sleepwalking. Sleepwalking makes people do illogical things, after all. A perfect handprint of frost slowly melted in the morning sun. By the time my parents investigated, it had vanished. In the field behind our house, they discovered a massive circular area of flattened corn about 30 feet in diameter. The stalks weren't broken, they were bent at precise 90-degree angles, all pointing clockwise. My dad dismissed it as teenage mischief or wind damage. The local newspaper blamed it on X-Files-inspired pranks. People always have explanations. They'll tell you crop circles are proven hoaxes, but they haven't seen what I've seen. This wasn't some prank. This was something else entirely. We moved to Columbus the next year. My parents claimed it was for my dad's job, though he was a farmer, which always made me suspect other reasons. I spent that entire year sleeping on our living room couch, startling at every sound. Now I'm 41. I have a successful career, a family, a seemingly normal life. But I still can't sleep in a room with uncovered windows. My husband installed blackout curtains in our bedroom after I had a panic attack at the mere suggestion of open windows. My kids think it's strange that our bedroom windows don't face outside, but I know what I saw, and some things can't be explained away. I first noticed it during childhood, something watching me through windows. Its presence marked by strange geometric patterns and a soft, barely audible humming. At night, its liquid mercury eyes seemed fixed on me, studying me intently. Last month, something unsettling happened. My 11-year-old daughter, who knows nothing of my past experiences, suddenly complained about strange lights outside her window. She had pulled back her curtains in the middle of the night, and I immediately had her switch rooms with her brother, the room without windows. Many have tried to explain my experiences away. Sleep paralysis, they say, or just a child scared by alien documentaries. I've had childhood fears before, and looking back, some nightmares were clearly influenced by movies or hallucinations. But this was different. I'm not a child anymore, and I know exactly what I saw. It happened on a perfect stargazing night. Our group had driven out to an old lake just outside town, loaded with blankets, coolers, and excitement about an anticipated meteor shower. What we witnessed that night was nothing any astronomer could have predicted. As darkness settled and stars emerged, we saw them, a formation of lights moving across the sky with impossible precision. These glowing orbs traveled in perfect synchronization, almost like they were connected by invisible threads. They shifted seamlessly between geometric shapes, triangles, straight lines, perfect circles, dissolving and reforming with an otherworldly smoothness. We tried guessing what they might be. Drones, experimental aircraft, but the absolute silence made each theory seem more implausible. Our phone cameras failed completely, unable to capture the distant, mesmerizing display. Frustrated, we simply watched this silent ballet unfold against the night sky. Whether you believe my account or not is up to you, but I know what I experienced was real. The night stretched on, our eyes locked on mysterious lights moving across the lake's surface. We tracked them silently, pointing and hurrying to keep them in sight. Suddenly they began to rise, ascending higher and higher until they blended seamlessly with the stars above. We walked back in silence, each of us lost in our own thoughts. What had we just experienced? Were there rational explanations, or had we witnessed something truly inexplicable? In the days that followed, we scoured the internet, searching for anything that might explain what we'd seen. But nothing matched our encounter. It felt like a shared collective dream. Even now, we occasionally bring up that night, especially when the sky is clear and stars are bright. We half-jokingly talk about returning to the lake, wondering if we might somehow summon those lights back. Part of me thinks it's better to leave the mystery untouched. Yet, I can't help wondering what was out there. My work as a marine security consultant in Monaco usually involves protecting wealthy clients' yachts. But what I witnessed last week made me realize theft might be the least of their concerns. It happened during the quiet season in late January when tourists have vanished and silence reigns. I was conducting a night patrol on an enormous 85-meter yacht with its own helipad when something strange occurred around 1 a.m. The bridge instrument suddenly went haywire. The radar showed a massive underwater movement that sonar couldn't confirm. Initially, I suspected equipment malfunction. Then the water around the yacht began to glow, not with typical bioluminescence, but with an artificial cold blue light, reminiscent of LED strips. Otterol isn't deep, maybe 30 meters at most. Whatever was generating this light had to be enormous, occupying almost the entire harbor's depth. I contacted Port Authority, who reported similar system failures across multiple boats. That's when I saw it emerge. Unlike a violent whale breaching, this object rose deliberately and slowly, more like a submarine. Except it wasn't. The surface was perfectly smooth and dark, defying explanation. I first noticed the object rising from the water, an enormous metallic craft roughly oval-shaped, about 40 m long. Water seemed to slide off it unnaturally, almost as if the surface was actively repelling liquid. As it ascended, geometric patterns etched into its exterior became visible, not reflecting light, but emitting it in complex, shifting sequences that looked like living optical illusions. What's most bizarre is how such a massive object could appear in Monaco, one of the most densely populated places on Earth, without widespread notice. Security cameras failed completely. Witnesses who claimed to see it found their photos and videos mysteriously corrupted. My credibility rests on 3 other security officers from different yachts who corroborated what I saw. The object hovered precisely 2 m above the water for exactly 7 minutes. I timed it meticulously. During those minutes, every electronic device in the port died, with only old analog instruments remaining functional. Then it simply sank back into the water without splash or disturbance, as if the sea itself was absorbing it. Divers from the Oceanographic Museum investigated the next day, discovering only a perfectly circular 40 m diameter depression in the seabed. The sediment inside this circle was utterly sterile. No bacteria, no organic matter, just lifeless sand. Strange developments have followed. Fish have abandoned that harbor section. Megayacht scanning equipment repeatedly detects phantom objects underwater. Wealthy boat owners have started relocating to other ports, tight-lipped about their reasons. I've seen those geometric patterns again, faintly glowing through 20 m of water, but by the time Port Authority responded, they had vanished. An old port worker shared intriguing information. Strange light reports in Monaco's waters extend back decades. The Oceanographic Museum maintains a classified incident file dating to the 1960s. This is particularly strange given that Monaco's waters are among the most extensively monitored globally, with constant sonar, radar, and security surveillance. The fact that something so large can appear and disappear at will, leaving almost no trace, makes me wonder what other mysteries might lurk beneath these waters. I keep an old-fashioned film camera and a manual compass in my pocket these days. Late at night, I watch the patterns reflecting off the yacht hulls, wondering if something down here is trying to communicate, or perhaps studying us, waiting. The dreams started about a month ago. Unexpected and vivid, they've transformed my nights into a landscape of inexplicable experiences. I drift into a realm that defies every known rule of reality. This place stretches beyond any landscape I've ever seen. Skies shift colors more rapidly than Earth's sunrises and sets. There's no discernible ground, just a suspended void that somehow feels full, like floating in a waterless ocean. The beings here defy description. Not human, not even animal in any recognizable sense. They're fluid forms made of light, shadow, and whispers of what might be fabric or flesh. Communication happens through pure emotion, feelings transmitted directly into my mind. An overwhelming symphony of joy, sorrow, curiosity, and something deeper I can't quite understand. I'm not afraid exactly, more like perpetually balanced on the edge of comprehending something monumental. They show me visions, stars being born, galaxies dancing, quiet spaces where nothing seems to exist. Yet within these visions there's a profound sense of companionship, as if I'm being granted access to the universe's inner workings. Each morning, I wake abruptly. The images fade, but the emotions remain. I've tried journaling, sketching the beings and their bizarre, beautiful landscapes, but nothing captures the experience. It's simultaneously frustrating and fascinating. Are these just dreams? My subconscious weaving together fragments of science shows, books, and late-night philosophical discussions? Or something more? Because it feels like more, a glimpse into a realm where the mind can travel, but the body cannot follow. The sky was setting, painting a canvas of oranges and purples as I lounged on a picnic blanket in the park. Just another lazy Sunday afternoon. A bright silvery object caught my eye, moving steadily across the dusk. At first I dismissed I as a plane or satellite, nothing unusual. Boohen, something impossible happened. I stopped, squinting, as did everyone around me. A couple nearby paused air conversation. A kid dropped his soccer ball. The object suddenly halted mid-flight, hanging motionless like a suspended portrait. For a minute we all watched. Was this some group hallucination? Nobody moved. Suddenly the object zipped across his sky, faster than anything I'd ever seen. More like a streak of pure light than any man-made machine. And hen just as quickly I vanished completely. Gone, as if I had never existed, the air felt electric. Whispers erupted around me. Everyone was asking, "Did you see that?" I grabbed my phone, thinking I'd check key news. Local media reporting a mysterious flying object. Unlikely. As darkness fell and stars emerged, I laid back, my mind racing. Was I a secret aircraft? Something extraterrestrial? An interdimensional phenomenon? A perfectly meteor? I might never know. Part of me likes mystery. Each night now promises another journey, and I'm no sure I want a back of wonder. Not just yet. Whoever might make sense of a part of me still hesitates. Now whenever I move under open sky, I'm always searching, expecting someone, hoping whatever object was, I go a piece of my skepticism with it, and somehow I'm okay with hat. I'm one summer night when I was around 10 or 11, something strange happened that I still can't decide if it was real or just a dream. The horses were running wildly in the pasture, which caught my attention and made me want to investigate. Our family lived in an isolated area with a huge old barn, and I decided to check things out. When I walked into the barn, I saw an enormous white figure climbing into the loft. He turned and looked at me, then slowly came back down. What struck me most was that despite his size, I felt no fear. Instead, he seemed tired and sad. He approached me and reached out his hand, similar to how someone might try to calm a stray animal. I chose to take his hand, and we walked to our hangout space in the barn. An area with old couches, some toys, and a radio. The moment he saw the radio, he became incredibly interested. He started fiddling with it, and I kept asking what he wanted, but he never spoke a single word. Since he wouldn't tell me his name, I started calling him Radio. After playing with the radio for a while, he sat down on the couch. I brought over my favorite horse book and began showing him different horse breeds, flipping through the pages and humming. Eventually, he gently took the book from me and closed it, as if signaling he was finished. When I got up to put the book away, he lay down on the couch, so large that his head rested on one armrest while his legs dangled over the other. He was a pure white giant with no hair I could recall. His eyes were jet black, small, and slightly downward slanting. Before going back to the house, I covered him with a blanket. When I woke up the next morning, the entire experience rushed back to me. My feet were dirty, suggesting I'd been outside. Excited, I grabbed some snacks and ran to the barn. In our hangout space, everything looked exactly as I remembered. The blanket was on the floor, the book was on the table, and the radio was out of place. But the figure was gone, leaving me to wonder whether what I experienced was real or just a vivid dream. A habit of sleepwalking haunted my past, and I wondered if it was all just a dream. Initially, I thought this person was simply strange, hoping they had found safety. As I grew older, I convinced myself I had imagined the entire Kanta needed to let it go. Years later, the movie Prometheus changed everything. When the all-white alien appeared on screen, I nearly jumped out of my seat. It wasn't an exact match, but seeing it felt like encountering a ghost. Back then, I knew nothing about aliens, with my only reference being the classic little green men. Despite this, I tried pushing the memory aside, believing it couldn't be real. As time passed, doubts crept in. How could I have imagined a being I'd never seen or heard of before? Could this experience have been genuine? Were these memories of a radio encounter actually true? I wondered if anyone else had ever experienced something similar. My story begins during a work shift at a nursing home, about 45 minutes from home. I typically work weekend double shifts, evenings and overnight 16-hour rotations. This particular weekend, I agreed to morning and evening shifts, which meant disrupting my usual sleep schedule. The night shift nurse arrived late on Sunday, but I wasn't bothered since I needed to catch up on charting. While giving report, I heard yelling from a resident who had fallen. He was cognitively aware and wearing non-slip-resistant warm socks, which resulted in a trip to the ER for a potential hip injury. I left work around 1-2 a.m. after nearly 20 hours of work in 2 days. Exhausted but functional, I drove my tiny car home. My friend wasn't answering the phone, and the route home winds through lakeside roads. Water helps keep me alert. Realizing I'd forgotten my glasses, I was too tired to turn back. Traveling through small towns and wooded areas, I listened to an audiobook to stay awake, completely unaware of the strange encounter that awaited me. I was driving home late at night through the woods when I noticed a bright light, almost like a spotlight, cutting through the trees. As I continued down the road, I remembered seeing a deer in this same spot the night before. Approaching a bend, I spotted a very thin figure in skin-tight black clothes kneeling near the deer. My vision was blurry without my glasses, but something about the scene felt off. The spotlight seemed impossibly positioned in the woods, and I wondered how any vehicle could have reached this spot. My car was barely moving, and I was exhausted. I rolled down my window and called out, asking if everything was okay, not really looking directly at the figure. I thought maybe they needed help with the deer. As I stopped about 15 to 20 feet from the figure, I was still trying to pause my audiobook and fiddle with my unresponsive touchscreen radio. After looking at my phone to stop the book, I glanced up and realized this was definitely not human. The creature stood up and faced me. Its head was enormous, with giant eyes, completely different from any alien depiction on television. It began walking toward my car. Suddenly, I couldn't breathe or move. Time seemed to stop. A voice inside my head said, "Sleep." When I blinked, everything was gone. The creature, the deer, everything. My clock showed nearly 4 in the morning. I was pulled over with no memory of stopping, my window down, phone in hand, audiobook paused. I tried calling my sister, but she didn't answer, so I called my workplace asking about my glasses and the resident, eventually claiming I had fallen asleep. The person on the phone stayed with me until I got home, but I knew I hadn't actually fallen asleep. Something else had happened. Growing up in a small rural town, the night sky always captivated me. Stars and planets seemed like an unexplored frontier beckoning my curiosity. One summer night in July, everything changed. The conditions were perfect for stargazing, warm, clear, with minimal light pollution. I set up my telescope in a field outside town, a thermos of coffee by my side. The Milky Way was breathtaking that night. As darkness deepened, something unusual caught my eye. Initially, I mistook the light for a satellite or plane, but its movement was bizarre. It zigzagged across the sky in ways no known aircraft could. Intrigued, I adjusted my telescope for a closer look. Through the lens, an oval-shaped object emerged, pulsating with an otherworldly glow. Mesmerized, I watched it hover and then suddenly descend rapidly into the field near me. The air vibrated. A high-pitched sound filled my ears. As I approached, a sleek, metallic craft came into view, its lights blinking in a hypnotic rhythm. A side panel opened, and a being stepped out. Tall and humanoid, it was unlike anything I'd ever seen. Pale, luminescent blue skin covered its form, with large black eyes that seemed like deep space pools. Those eyes met mine. An inexplicable calm washed over me, a silent communication telling me not to fear. Time seemed to suspend during our wordless exchange. Then, as abruptly as it began, the being returned to the craft. The panel closed, and the object vanished into the night sky. I was left standing alone in the field, the silence returning. The experience felt surreal, like a dream that might dissolve if I moved. I haven't told anyone about this. Just thinking about it terrifies me. If I fell asleep, I could have hurt someone. But if I didn't, then Sky Revelation by Mystic Saucer 028 remains my secret. And I had always been drawn to the beauty and solitude of the wilderness at night, with the sky an absolute tapestry of stars unobscured by city lights. Sometimes last night I was awakened by a strange humming sound, unlike anything I'd heard before, a resonant frequency that seemed to vibrate through the ground. Curious and suddenly moved, I stepped out into the bright air. Beside the green was something from another world. Above the trees, a series of bright lights danced across the sky. They were vivid and multicolored, moving in patterns that defied exploration. These weren't like any aircraft lights. They were silent, with a strange hum that seemed impossible. I reached for my camera, but it dropped. The lights sped into impossibility, and then quiet returned as if nothing had happened. I was left trying to make sense of what I'd just witnessed. The ground, eventually covered with frost, sparked various theories. Some suggested secret military tests, while others were convinced of extraterrestrial origin. These were moments of real questions without clear answers. The experience stayed with me, a constant source of wonder and speculation. I began researching and found a rich history of documented accounts. To this day, I can't explain what I saw that night. Whether it was a natural phenomenon or truly from another world, it opened my eyes to something else. And for that, I'm grateful. The encounter changed me. I became more introspective, pondering our place in the universe and the possibility of other life forms. I didn't speak of my experience for fear of disbelief or ridicule, but I couldn't shake the feeling that what I had witnessed was significant, a glimpse into a universe far more complex and wondrous than I had ever imagined. Alaska, with its vast waters and clear, dark skies, has always been a hot spot for such sightings. I knew what I saw was real, though it felt like a dream. My telescope packed away, I headed home, my mind racing with questions. Who were they? Why were they here? What did they want? Wasn't. I was leaving my brothers, and the place where we lived was unlike anything you might expect. Our parents found this house in what seemed like the middle of nowhere. Miles of empty fields stretched around us with a breathtaking view of the Rockies right outside our windows. Back then, the land next to our property was Rocky Flats, a mysterious site where nuclear reactors and who knows what else were stored underground for decades. They say it's cleaned up now, but strange things still happen. We'd see dragonflies bigger than my head in spring, and I once spotted a two-headed bull snake slinking through the backyard. The living arrangement was unusual. Our landlord was essentially renting out his basement, but the house functioned more like an apartment building. We had our own entrances, driveway and garage, though we shared a mailbox and address. The main drive was a huge circular path that branched downhill into our section of the house. On the way down, you'd pass a little brick building with a glass window. An old visible toilet and various junk items were inside, with general store painted on the front. The landlord explained that the entire property used to be a gas station when the highway was the only route into the mountains. Evidence of its past was everywhere. A big hill had eroded over time, revealing an old tank and bucket stuck in the hillside. Surrounding farmland completed the landscape. A steep drop behind the house held a horse stable, and beyond that, a pasture where a farmer rotated Angus cattle throughout the year. We were essentially surrounded by nothing, sometimes terrifying, yet undeniably beautiful. The rental deal was good and the landlord seemed agreeable. My parents had found something unique. One of my first nights there, I experienced something extraordinary. As a kid who rarely had vivid dreams, this was entirely new. In the dream, I walked from my room into the living room. My mother sat in her chair, watching TV, but a circle of strangers stood in the middle of the room. They didn't acknowledge my presence, completely unaware I was there. I noticed the people around her chanting as soon as I saw her lying motionless on the floor. She was wearing a long mauve Victorian-style dress, her blonde hair covering her face. A significant portion of her dress was stained with blood. What struck me most was that her body was floating about 4 to 5 inches off the floor. I was looking at something in the middle of a circle when I squeezed past some people. I knew she was dead because she wasn't moving. As soon as I noted these details, I woke up. This experience would forever give me chills. I don't remember how long we had lived in the house at that point. It seemed like a normal night. My parents had gone to bed and I was tucking myself in. I don't recall dreaming about anything else that night. If my memory serves me right, I had fallen asleep instantly. Suddenly, I'm laying in bed with my eyes closed. My body is asleep, but my mind is awake. I feel eyes on me. When I open my eyes, I see myself floating above my body, staring down. Out of my periphery, another version of me is crouched in the entrance of my walk-in closet, also staring. Both versions have glowing red eyes. I wanted to scream. When I closed my eyes to do so, I opened them again and found myself on the ceiling looking down into my bed. Bed me was still there, now with glowing red eyes. Closet me was also still present. They were both staring up at me. I screamed in silence. They began to grin wider than any human should be able to. Then I fell. I woke up for real, drenched in sweat, still in my bed, feeling like I was going to vomit. I didn't sleep the rest of the night and have struggled with terrible insomnia ever since. Remember the cattle herd I mentioned earlier? I'm pretty sure they were mutilated. My dad used to look out our back door with binoculars to watch scenery and spy on distant neighbors. One day, after returning from school, he handed me the binoculars and said, "Look at the cow pasture. Tell me what you see." It took me a minute to center on the right area, but once I did, my jaw dropped. The field, which usually housed about 50 Black Angus cattle, was completely empty, save for 2 black lumps on the ground. Ever since we moved there, that field had never been empty. We lived in a strange place, Rocky Flats, with moments of unsettling experiences that stuck with me. One night, my dad and I decided to investigate 2 mysterious lumps in the darkness. We crept down the hill with flashlights, hoping to understand what we were seeing. When we got closer, we discovered 2 cow carcasses. But these weren't typical dead animals. Their bodies were completely hollowed out, with no heads, legs, or tails. Wasn't like the typical coyote attacks we were used to seeing. Even the local coyotes seemed to avoid these carcasses, which was bizarre. What made the scene truly eerie was the lack of blood or signs of struggle. The cuts looked surgical, precise and clean. The farmer who owned the land never returned for the rest of his cattle, and eventually a foreboding sign marked the spot where these bodies had decayed into nothing. Years later, during the summer before 7th grade, another strange encounter would define my memory of this peculiar place. It was a Wednesday night, technically early Thursday morning. The evening before, we had watched Unsolved Mysteries, which makes this memory even more surreal. I woke up in the middle of the night, lying on my right side. My eyes were shut, but I was completely awake. When I decided to open my eyes, I saw a being right beside my bed. It seemed fixated on the plush bear I kept with me. A classic gray alien, shorter with pale gray skin, and those massive black slanted eyes. I was only about 12, and the terror was overwhelming. I pulled the covers over my head, experiencing bizarre temperature sensations, first warm, then cool, then warm again. Later, I realized this was likely shock. I couldn't scream, feeling completely frozen. My mind raced with terrifying questions. Would it kill me? Abduct me? Abduct me? Had it already taken me? These experiences at Rocky Flats weren't just scary, they were unforgettable moments that defied explanation. Here's my rewritten version. When I was 12, I experienced something that haunts me to this day. I remember lying in bed, completely terrified by a strange presence in my room. In a desperate attempt to protect myself, I started violently kicking my legs under the covers, hoping this bizarre defense might work. Hours seemed to pass as I remained motionless, hidden beneath my blankets. Then, suddenly, I heard a sound unlike anything I'd ever experienced before. It was crisp and clean, almost mechanical, yet not quite. The sound lasted barely 2 seconds, but felt like it surrounded me from both inside and outside the room. In that moment, something inside me knew they were gone. Strange as it sounds, I'm convinced that sound was their method of transportation, leaving. Needless to say, sleep was impossible that night and the following morning. It took me considerable time to share this terrifying encounter with my family, who initially didn't believe me. Years later, my mom sometimes suggests this experience might explain my ongoing insomnia. Who knows, maybe she's right. Speaking of strange encounters, my grandmother recently shared an incredible story that caught my attention. During a casual conversation about the Area 51 news, she calmly mentioned that aliens had landed on our local beach in the 1970s, keeping their ship hidden beneath the sand. Coming from my conservative religious grandmother, this seemed impossible. but she spoke with such matter-of-fact certainty and immediately returned to watching television as if she'd just commented on the weather. Curious, I mentioned this to my aunt. To my surprise, she responded just as casually, confirming that part of the beach is indeed sectioned off because of this incident. When I discussed this with other neighbors, they surprisingly agreed. Intrigued, I researched local news archives and discovered multiple stories supporting their claims. What started as an unbelievable tale suddenly seemed far more complex than I'd initially thought. The night was dark and quiet when I had my alien encounter. I was 17, hanging out with my best friend in rural New Jersey during the summer. Her neighborhood had only one entrance, with a big, empty field across from it. We'd been stargazing and decided to walk back to her house around midnight. Something felt off immediately, and strange tension hung in the air as we approached her driveway. Halfway up, my friend suddenly stopped walking and stood completely still. When I followed her gaze, I saw it, a creature crouched over what might have been a septic tank in the backyard. None of us seemed prepared for this moment. In an instant, the being rose up, towering at least 7 feet tall. It was white, paper white, and incredibly thin. We locked eyes for maybe 2 seconds before it moved. Each step covered roughly 6 feet, crossing the yard with impossible speed. Terrified, we grabbed each other's hands and ran toward the locked front door. Inside, we tried convincing ourselves it was just a deer, but we knew better. My friend has since passed away, and I often wonder if she ever got answers about what we saw that night. The memory remains vivid, an unexplained encounter that defies rational explanation. Though we tried to rationalize it, deep down we both understood that was no ordinary creature. Something otherworldly had visited us in that quiet New Jersey backyard, leaving us forever changed. Driving home late one night around 11:30 p.m. from my job at Sonic, I was traveling along US Route 64, a mostly empty road surrounded by houses and farmland. My 99 Ford Explorer was cruising at about 65 to 70 miles per hour, with the radio playing softly. Suddenly, a bright green light ray shot through the sunroof, completely enveloping my vehicle's interior for 2 or 3 seconds before vanishing without a trace. Understandably startled, I sped up and quickly made it home, which was only about 5 minutes away. I wasn't exhausted. I'd typically wake up around 5 or 6 a.m. and wasn't on any medications or suffering from any illnesses that might explain this experience. When I've shared the story, people seem skeptical, though I don't believe they think I'm lying outright. Earlier that same night, something equally strange had occurred. While driving, my companion and I spotted lights in the sky forming a perfect triangle. These weren't typical stars. They were distinctly brighter and larger. My friend immediately exclaimed, "Holy cow, what the heck is that?" At first, I wondered if I was imagining things, but her reaction confirmed something unusual was happening. The lights began moving at roughly our driving speed and started flashing green and red erratically. We decided to follow them, which was both thrilling and brief. After about 5 minutes past my house, the lights suddenly turned, accelerated, and completely disappeared. We pulled over, hoping to catch another glimpse, but had no luck. We kept discussing how bizarre the entire encounter was. Some initially suggested it might have been a helicopter, but that couldn't explain the perfect triangular formation or the incredible speed. This happened 3 to 4 years ago, and I'd been thinking about it recently. I'm sharing my story, hoping someone might have seen something similar, or can offer insights into what these mysterious lights could have been. My boyfriend and I were camping high up in the mountains on July 11th, 2019. The area was so remote that there was virtually no light pollution. You could see almost every star in the sky on a clear night like this one. We were just relaxing and staring at the stars when something strange started happening. The stars began acting differently. They zigzagged and moved upward, almost like they were playing with each other, weaving near and away in circular motions. We were amazed and couldn't take our eyes off the sky. This went on for about 2 to 3 solid hours. Around 2 o'clock or 3 a.m., I noticed a bright light between 2 mountains. It was incredibly bright, so I nudged my partner to look. We saw this massive white-yellow star-like object moving upward quickly, and then realized it was coming toward us. My partner, who isn't easily scared, became terrified. He nearly broke my nose trying to hide fully in the tent, both of us screaming as this object stopped right above us. When it was directly overhead, it seemed to have a diamond-like shape and was incredibly bright. Strangely, the light didn't shine through the tent, and the object made no noise, ruling out possibilities like a drone. Seconds later, we were both inexplicably calm, looking at the stars again as if nothing had happened. If only one of us had experienced this, we might have found an explanation. But we both saw the exact same thing and can't explain it. What's even more bizarre is how we feel when discussing the incident. It seems like we're lying, like it never happened. The more I try to remember details about that night, the less I can recall. My partner experiences the same thing. We can only confirm we both saw something extraordinary, but the memory feels increasingly elusive. And every time I try to share my story, it feels like something is actively trying to suppress my experience or make me doubt what I saw. I'm searching for answers and wondering if anyone else has gone through something similar. It happened on September 7th, 2006, when my friend Jen and I were driving home from a friend's house near the old Big Ear Radio Observatory. Around 10 p.m., we were on Route 23 between Delaware and Lewis Center, Ohio. At first, we spotted a distant bright light in the sky and jokingly remarked it might be a UFO. We initially lost sight of the distant object and forgot about it. But as we crested a hill near the golf course where the telescope once stood, everything changed. An enormous glowing football-shaped UFO hung right above us, moving steadily over Route 23 toward Lewis Center. It was the most terrifying and awe-inspiring thing I've ever witnessed. We pulled over and got out of the car. The object was massive. I felt like an ant beneath this giant glowing structure. Its surface looked like the sun, with an orange-reddish plasma engulfing it. Flames seemed to bubble and churn within its form. I tried recording with my Motorola Razr, but the phone inexplicably failed to capture anything despite being fully charged. The UFO gradually backed away and floated toward Lewis Center. We followed it, watching for nearly an hour as it performed a dizzying display of lights. Suddenly it flashed and blasted away in an instant, leaving behind a wispy blue-teal vapor trail. Later, I learned this happened near the site of the famous WOW signal detection in 1977. As an airman trained to observe and identify aircraft, I can confidently say this object was enormous, comparable to an NFL football stadium floating above the highway, houses, and buildings. At least 5 other people besides myself witnessed this extraordinary event. When I was 10, my brother and I were the last ones off the school bus every day. Our route took us through the Midwest countryside, all cows, trees, and open fields. About a mile from my house, I glanced out the window and spotted an orange blimp in the sky. It looked like a standard American football. At the time, I wasn't surprised, since we'd seen a blue blimp just days earlier during recess. I watched it casually, thinking it was interesting to see a blimp so far from town. Then something weird happened. The blimp suddenly shifted from its football shape to a tiny, shiny dot that looked like a star in the night sky. But it wasn't a star. Just seconds ago, it had been a blimp. Before I could fully process what I was seeing, it launched higher into the sky, dropped back to its original height, and then shot off into space. I was a quiet kid, but being the last one on the bus, I couldn't help shouting about what I'd witnessed. When I got home, I ran to my mother, talking rapidly like a wild-eyed prophet. Naturally, she thought I was crazy and shut down my story quickly. I never mentioned it to my dad because her reaction had deflated my excitement. Years later, when I was 22, something incredible happened. My dad and I were on a road trip to pick up a car he'd bought, and we started talking about UFOs. That's when he shared his own strange experience. When he was 12 or 13, he and his brothers were playing near a creek close to their house, which was just a few miles from where we lived, when they saw an orange football-shaped object in the sky. As I gained altitude, bluish-purple orbs began cascading from the main object. Each time they appeared, they would revolve around it, intensifying until all I could see was a spinning blue glow. In an instant, I shot forward in a flash of light, like the Enterprise going to warp speed, leaving only a bluish trailing haze behind. It was the most profound experience of my life. Here's the rewritten text. Something strange happened to my parents recently in Western New York. They're rational people who don't use drugs or alcohol and have sharp memories and keen intuition. My dad has his own reasons for believing in aliens, but that's another story. My mom sent me a message describing an bizarre encounter. They were driving back from Jamestown between Randolph and Steenburg when something extraordinary caught their attention. A bright light in the sky started behaving in ways that defied explanation. At first, my mom thought it was a falling star. But as she watched, she realized this was no ordinary celestial event. The light was moving too quickly and too strangely to be a plane. When she asked my dad if he saw it, his reaction confirmed her suspicions. The object was falling straight down in a way no aircraft normally would. Then suddenly it vanished. They looked around, expecting it to have disappeared behind a hill or mountain, but the landscape was nothing but open cornfields. There was nowhere for the object to hide. Moments later, the light reappeared behind their car and shot straight up into the sky. It illuminated the entire sky with an intense white light. My dad turned around, watching as the object seemed to follow them. They both recognized the same eerie feeling they'd experienced during a previous unexplained encounter. My father is typically skeptical about supernatural phenomena, but when I shared this story, he paused and mentioned something remarkable. He had seen almost the exact same thing, behaving identically over 30 years earlier. They still have no explanation for what they witnessed that day. I've had 3 UFO experiences in my life, and I'll focus on the most compelling encounter. The setting was Lexington, South Carolina, a suburban area near Columbia, during the 1,000-year flood of October 5, 2015. At the time, I was 40 years old and working a job that required me to be at work around 3:30 or 4 in the morning. Despite the flood shutting down my workplace, my company insisted I come in to assess the damage. That morning, I followed my usual routine, waking up at 2 o'clock, making coffee, and stepping onto the back porch to enjoy the twilight hours. A light rain was falling, and low clouds completely covered the sky. Our house sat at the end of a cul-de-sac, with lined trees surrounding the property. Street lights cast a slight orange glow on the cloudy sky. As I leaned on the deck's banister, something caught my eye moving through the sky. Initially, I thought it was an owl or large bird, but as it approached, I realized it wasn't distant, it was massive. The object moved slowly, yet somehow felt rapid. It passed directly overhead, flying under the clouds and above the pine trees. What I saw was a perfectly black triangle with a unique textured bottom surface. The texture reminded me of Adidas Nemesis soccer shoe, embossed lines creating an intricate pattern. With the trees standing about 40 to 50 feet tall, I estimated the object to be around 60 feet in size. I have other UFO experiences and even a Bigfoot sighting, but those are stories for another time. I'm sharing this particular encounter hoping someone might have insights or similar experiences. The event remains vivid and unexplained. I was about the size of a traditional Walmart parking lot, hovering 80 feet off the ground. Slow and silent, I moved with absolute intention, gliding like an air hockey puck on a fixed trajectory. My speed was steady, maybe around 20 miles per hour, faster than a bicycle, but slower than a car. At 2:30 in the morning, I chased it through the side gate of the house, yelling to myself, "What the hell was that?" In the front yard, I quietly watched as it skated off into the darkness, perfectly straight and completely indifferent. I regret not taking pictures. It happened so quickly, and in the moment, my brain struggled to process what I was seeing. This wasn't a bird or a plane. A drone seemed possible, but it was too large and completely silent. The experience was difficult to comprehend, yet I'm certain of what I saw. Anything beyond our current understanding is essentially alien. Ironically, a black silent triangle would be the last UFO scenario I'd ever fabricate. I wondered if the flood might be connected to its presence. It seemed too extraordinary to be coincidental. My third unusual encounter occurred while stargazing with my son on the same deck. Using the Google Sky app, we were identifying stars on a clear night. A particularly bright star caught our attention. When I overlaid my phone, the app showed nothing in that region, even after careful calibration. The moment I said, "There's no star here," it zoomed across the horizon, stopped abruptly, shot upward, and then blinked out like an old tube TV powering down. Its movements were smooth and precise. If I'd hold a yardstick at arm's length, this object traversed its entire length in a second. I can't precisely calculate the distance, but its ability to travel so quickly, stop instantly, redirect, and disappear was incredible. My son was too young at the time to fully comprehend what we'd witnessed. Growing up, I knew my mom was always fascinated by aliens, which seemed odd given her strict religious background. She came from a conservative Brethren Baptist upbringing, but her interest in extraterrestrial life persisted. I think this passion might have been inherited from her father, who possibly encountered something mysterious during his trucking and military years. As a child, I often saw her watching UFO documentaries, hoping to witness something extraordinary herself. Her chance came one fall evening while driving through the Appalachian Mountains in western North Carolina. Traveling back from a festival in eastern Tennessee with my sister and grandmother, she spotted something unusual. 3 to 5 lights arranged in a circular formation. The lights drew closer, catching the attention of everyone in the car. As they approached, the object moved behind them, hovering unusually low to the ground. My mum opened the sunroof and windows, but total silence surrounded them. Suddenly, an opaque white column appeared on the road behind her car, maintaining a constant distance. Her curiosity quickly transformed into terror. She accelerated, and the encounter lasted less than a minute before the phenomenon vanished without a trace. When she shared the story with me later that night, she wasn't excited as I expected. Instead, she was deeply shaken. Despite years of wanting to see a UFO, the actual experience left her frightened and unable to sleep for several nights. Even now, a decade later, she rarely discusses the incident. Another strange event occurred when I was around 15, though the exact timing remains fuzzy in my memory. I sleep in a second-story room with a massive window that spans almost the entire wall, and I usually keep the curtains open to stargaze. One night, I awoke to find my room completely lit up with a blinding light taking over the entire window. From the corner opposite the window, I could barely look out as it was like staring directly into the sun. For about 2 minutes, I sat completely frozen with fear before deciding to grab my phone and film the phenomenon. The moment I reached for my phone, the light suddenly vanished and my room returned to darkness. I couldn't make out anything through the window as my eyes struggled to adjust after such intense brightness. After about a minute, when my vision cleared, everything appeared completely normal. Worried this might have been a dream, I wrote myself a note to investigate in the morning. The adrenaline and fear kept me awake for hours, but I eventually fell asleep. When I woke up, the note was exactly where I had left it. I discussed the incident with my family, but they insisted they hadn't seen or heard anything unusual. I've thoroughly explored every logical explanation: sleep paralysis, night terrors, and even potential hallucinations. However, I've never hallucinated before or since, and I have no significant history of mental illness beyond depression, which wasn't an issue at the time. This event occurred during a strange period when I would wake up with unexplained bruises and scratches almost daily. My memories from that time are incredibly hazy, which is unusual for me since I typically have an excellent memory. I can only recall fragmented moments. I live on the north coast of Northern Ireland, near the Giant's Causeway. Just over a week ago, I was watching television with my wife, sitting by a window where my laptop is plugged in. She was on the opposite sofa and couldn't see out of this particular window. It was around 8:30 p.m., completely dark outside with the lights of our small village, Bologna, visible in the distance. We're about 3 miles out, surrounded by farmland. After a week of reflection, I still cannot find a rational explanation for what happened. I'm left wondering about the nature of this inexplicable experience. Glancing out the window, a bright, multicolored light suddenly appears over the fields. At first, I thought it might be a firework, which would have been strange enough during the late March lockdown, but it was too slow, growing larger and shifting through about 3 different colors. Judging distances in the dark was tricky, but I estimated it was around 2 acres away, larger than a family car, and hovering roughly 80 to 100 feet up. The light eventually faded, behaving nothing like a typical firework and far too large to be a flare. Minutes later, a smaller light started moving around the same area, vanishing almost instantly when I looked directly at it. This light was about 1/3 the size of the original and moved from left to right. Unlike the town's annual firework display, which we can always hear from home, this was completely silent. Helicopters and drones don't typically have such lights, and a chopper that low would have made noise. A drone seemed the most plausible explanation, though I'd never seen one in that area during daylight. The lights would have needed to be incredibly powerful. Honestly, I think I might have seen a UFO. No local news or social media reported any skylights, and I haven't seen anything similar since. This wasn't my first unusual sky encounter. As a child, I had another strange experience. We were driving home from a fishing trip with my grandma in her new Ford truck, traveling on Interstate 70 between Globe and Peridot. Suddenly, a massive aircraft appeared, almost the size of a Zeppelin, with lights flashing blue, red, yellow, and green along its length in just a second. We passed an ambulance and a police vehicle, all of us stunned by this incredible sight. The aircraft remained stationary for quite a long time, creating a memory that has stayed with me ever since. I was very young when I saw what I believe was a UFO. I was with my parents and grandma at the time. She has since passed on, but my parents still remember the incident. The lights on the side looked like extremely bright windows to my mum, but to me they were just a row of bright lights. It stayed stationary for a long time before suddenly moving south to the top of Mount Turble, then went straight upwards and disappeared into the sky. The moon was out, and only clouds were above the summit. I think about this experience from time to time and sometimes doubt whether it happened. But 3 adults were in the truck with me, and a police officer was on the side of the road who also saw it. I wish I could find those other people and ask if they remember. I believe I've seen a UFO twice in my life. The first time was when I was 14 in Spain. Looking up at the night sky, a round thing flew low overhead. As I remember, it was round with yellow and small white lights around the underside. It was really odd. My family says it never happened, but I know what I saw. The second incident started with what looked like a star outside our house one night. We were all looking up, tracking what we thought was a satellite moving west. But then things got strange. It started going west again, then stopped once more. It went north and then just disappeared, blinked out completely. My most detailed encounter happened near Rhinebeck, New York, in late summer of 1989 or 1990. I was at work with 2 co-workers when one of them called us outside to see something. When we exited, we saw a classic V-shaped craft hovering above a tree in the front yard. It was directly above the tree, which was about 2 stories high, around 30 feet. I ran up to the tree, which put the craft 30 feet above me. It had 5 to 7 white lights, with the largest at the bottom center of the V and others running up from it. The most striking thing was that it made no noise. I just want to know what everyone thinks about these experiences. I was standing outside when something blocked out the sky. I couldn't make out a definite structure or body. My 2 co-workers went inside, but I stayed put in case it returned. And it did. When the object reappeared from behind the hill, its shape had transformed. The lights were now aligned in a straight line and had shifted to an orange color. It moved toward me, continuously changing shape, taking on a diamond form, then an X, then back to a V before hovering directly over the building. It continued south and vanished from sight. The second incident happened at home. I had just moved into a new apartment, and with my bed not yet arrived, I was sleeping on the floor. As a heavy sleeper, I rarely wake up suddenly, but that night was different. I sat straight up, something I'd never done before. The room's corner was illuminated by dozens of pale, multicolored lights. From the corner of my eye, I noticed a shadowy figure seeming to move closer. Then everything goes blank. The next morning, the details were fuzzy. Every electronic device in the house displayed 3 a.m. clocks was stopped or flashing, and the VCR was playing despite having no tape inserted. I had to unplug everything to reset them. My husband, my boyfriend at the time, had a similar experience 6 years ago. He woke me up, drenched in sweat and shaking. Initially hesitant, he described being awakened around midnight by a presence at the bed's end. He was alert, ready to defend himself if needed. A calm voice spoke in his mind, assuring him they meant no harm. I've been advised to try hypnosis about these incidents, but I'm skeptical. My friend is even a licensed hypnotherapist. Honestly, I'm not sure I want to know the full truth. My husband encountered something truly strange years ago. The being was incredibly tall and had to crouch in our basement due to its height. During these encounters, which happened at least once a week and sometimes up to 4 times, he would be awakened around midnight. During these visits, the entity would communicate with him telepathically, saying hello, and engaging in discussions about anything my husband was curious about. He described how the being reached out as if in greeting, and each time a voice would speak directly in his mind. What's most bizarre is how time seemed to pause during these interactions. What he thought were brief 10 to 15-minute encounters actually lasted over an hour. Between 1 a.m. and 1:30 a.m., he would suddenly return to reality, feeling like hardly any time had passed. Over time, my husband became less frightened and even developed a strange sort of friendship with this being. He mentioned the entity had a name, though frustratingly, I can't recall what it was. These encounters continued for months, with consistent patterns and timing. Then, just as suddenly as they began, everything stopped completely. It was as if the experiences were wiped from his memory. He never spoke about them again, and for 6 years it was like nothing had ever happened. Recently, the memory resurfaced for me, and now I can't stop thinking about the strangeness of it all. I haven't mentioned this to him, worried he might think I'm crazy or that bringing it up might disturb whatever mechanism caused him to forget. The uncertainty and mystery of these encounters continue to haunt me, leaving me desperate to understand what truly happened. My night was far from ordinary when I was 16. Most people might think I'm making this up, but it genuinely happened. What makes it even stranger is that this occurred on the same night I had an alien abduction dream. My mum was working a night shift at a local retirement home, leaving me alone for the evening. I spent the night like any typical teenager, playing video games, chatting with friends, and watching TV. After going to my room, I fell asleep and experienced an incredibly intense nightmare where I was abducted by aliens. The only vivid memory I have is my entire field of vision turning completely white, accompanied by a loud buzzing or humming sound. I woke up drenched in sweat, heart pounding, around 5:30 in the morning. To my shock, I wasn't in my own bed, but in my mum's room. Frozen and bewildered, I tried to make sense of the situation. After about 20 to 30 minutes, I managed to calm down enough to investigate. Heading downstairs, I noticed the glass door leading to our backyard. The wooden gate, which hadn't been opened in years due to overgrown vines, was wide open. When I tried to unlock the back door, the handle moved effortlessly. It was already unlocked. Cautiously entering the backyard, I examined the gate. I searched for footprints or any signs of forced entry, but found nothing. The old, rusty lock remained unchanged, not bent, broken, or damaged, just as it had always been. I carefully locked the gate and thoroughly checked the yard. Nothing was missing. Back inside, I locked the door and conducted a comprehensive search of the house. My bedroom showed my bed was still messy, confirming I had initially gone to sleep there. Puzzled, I wondered if I had sleepwalked. I checked the carpets and floors for any mud or dirt that would indicate outdoor wandering, but found absolutely nothing. I called my mum and recounted the entire bizarre experience, still unable to explain how I had ended up in her room or how the backyard gate had been opened. When I was just before 7th grade during a summer night in July, something unforgettable happened. It was a Wednesday night, early Thursday morning. My family had watched Unsolved Mysteries the evening before. I woke up in the middle of the night, lying on my right side, awake but with my eyes completely shut. I asked my sister if she had messed with the gate or unlocked it recently. She confirmed she hadn't and was just as surprised and confused as I was. To this day, I have no explanation for what occurred that night. Let me be clear about who I was as a teenager. I was deeply into sports, completely sober, and never touched substances. I didn't smoke or drink. What's strange is how terrified I would feel as the sky began to darken. When playing football or soccer with friends and evening approached, I'd often hurry home, constantly looking up at the sky with an inexplicable fear. Recently, I had a dream unlike any other. I was working at my factory job, operating a forklift as usual, when suddenly fireworks, or more accurately, a plume of light and an explosion appeared beyond the bay door from the other side of a valley. This was odd because I live in the desert, where valleys don't exist. We went outside after seeing these lights fly away to the left. The ground was illuminated, bright as a full moon multiplied tenfold. Suddenly we were in the backyard of my childhood house. Looking up, we saw only a night sky. But when we turned right, a typical-looking alien was there. The moment it noticed us, it screeched and jumped toward us, then dissolved into a brightening light. I woke up screaming and couldn't sleep until daylight. My cat, usually quite aware, stared at the wall behind me for a solid 30 minutes. This was different from my usual dreams. Normally I can control my nightmares and alter scary scenarios, but not this time. I hadn't even dreamed about aliens in over a decade. Questions swirl in my mind. What does this mean? Have they decided to return? Why me? Even months later, the entire experience continues to confuse me. The lingering uncertainty haunts me, leaving me with more questions than answers. I was about 12 years old when something happened that I've never been able to forget. That night, I was struggling to fall back asleep when I opened my eyes and saw something right beside my bed. There, next to me, was a being that looked exactly like the aliens I'd seen in movies and documentaries. It was shorter, with pale grey skin and those massive black slanted eyes that were completely focused on the plush bear I kept in my bed. The moment was indescribable. My body went through waves of temperature, first warm, then cool, then warm again. Later, I understood this was likely shock. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. My mind raced with terrifying questions. Would it kill me? Abduct me? Had it already taken me before? What would my family do if they saw this? After what felt like an eternity, I mustered up some childhood courage. My solution? Thrashing my legs under the covers, hoping to scare it away. It sounds ridiculous now, but I was absolutely petrified. Hours seemed to pass. Then, suddenly, I heard a sound. Even now, I can't fully describe it. It was crisp, potentially mechanical, lasting only 2 seconds. But in that moment, something in my mind instantly knew. They were leaving. The sound felt like their transportation departing. Needless to say, I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. It took me a long time to tell my family about this terrifying experience. Unsurprisingly, they didn't believe me. These days, my mother sometimes suggests this might explain my ongoing struggles with insomnia. The year was 1976, and we lived in the Middle East. My father worked in the secret police called Savok. Helicopter landings in our backyard were routine. My dad would often be picked up for missions. One night, a bright light caught my attention. I thought it was my father returning, but something felt different. The next thing I remember was waking up in bed, only to discover several days had passed. My father stood beside me with 2 well-dressed men, one American and the other a translator. They introduced themselves as Mr. John and began asking me strange questions. Shortly after, we moved to the UK. My brother, sister, and I lived there for 3 years. During this time, Mr. John appeared again with a new companion questioning me once more. In 1979, we relocated to the US, where we've remained since. Over the years, I tried asking my father about these mysterious encounters and our frequent moves. He consistently avoided discussing them until recently, when dementia changed everything. His revelations seemed so unbelievable that I initially dismissed them as medication-induced delusions. While visiting him in a Laguna Hills nursing home, an extraordinary moment occurred. A familiar man, the same one who had questioned me twice before, entered the room. Remarkably, he looked exactly the same as he had 35 to 40 years earlier. When he saw me, he pulled his cap down and left silently. My father's cryptic response was, "That's Mr. John. Remember Bai, Safe Moon?" To this day, I cannot comprehend the meaning. Another bizarre incident happened while driving home. A massive bright light, larger than a full moon, appeared in the sky. It shifted colors: green, yellow, red, blue, and two similar lights joined it. For about 15 seconds they danced and transformed before merging into one large light. This is the first time I've shared this story publicly. I would find comfort in hearing similar experiences from others. Here's the rewritten text at our family dinner when I was 7. Something extraordinary happened. We were a family of 5 seated around the table. My mother in front of me, my sister beside me, my father next to Mum, and my brother positioned between them. My back was turned toward the kitchen. Suddenly, a blinding white light erupted from the window directly across from my dad. Everyone seemed frozen except my mum and me. She urgently told me to run and hide. Without thinking, I immediately went to her bedroom, feeling it was the safest place. Under her king-size bed, I discovered something strange. The room was meticulously organized with storage bins neatly placed at the bed's foot and in the closet. The bed faced the door with its head against a wall between 2 large windows. What happened next was terrifying. Beneath the bed, I noticed a persistent light and absolute silence. Then I saw 6 sets of non-human feet surrounding me. They were attempting to reach me, with 2 coming through a crack, 3 positioned in front, and 1 at the bed's foot. Near me, a grey face with enormous eyes appeared. Inside those eyes, I witnessed an entire galaxy, colors merging like a breathtaking sunset. For a moment I was mesmerized. But when the being moved, I snapped back to reality. Just then, my childhood imaginary friend Nega appeared. Her presence seemed to interrupt the creature's attempts to reach me. Suddenly, all the grey humanoid figures vanished. I've never experienced anything like this before and wondered if others have had similar encounters. I noticed some strange things throughout my life, but one memory stands out from the rest. Back in the fall of 2005, when I was in 6th grade, I had an encounter that I'll never forget. It was between 6 and 8 o'clock Eastern Time at night, dark outside with only the back porch light on. I was chatting on the phone with my first boyfriend while watching my 2 dogs roam the backyard. Suddenly, a bright blue light appeared above us. It was like someone had flipped a switch, illuminating everything in an electric blue glow. Looking up, I saw what I can only describe as a perfectly symmetrical eye-like shape. The light was almost holographic, with a constantly changing rainbow of colors. For about 2 seconds, I stared in awe before it closed up, leaving just a colorful outline. Then it shot to the left like a shooting star and vanished. Shocked, I told my boyfriend I'd call him back and ran to my parents who were folding clothes in the bedroom. I shouted, I just saw aliens. They laughed at first and told me to stop joking, but my father knows me well. He saw my genuine panic and quickly changed the subject. To this day, I remember that moment with crystal clarity. What did I see? Why did I see it? I still have so many questions. This wasn't my only unexplained experience. Years earlier, I remembered seeing a creature with orange eyes in my mother's bathroom. Nega hushed me, and I seemed to forget about it until I turned 14. Although my imaginary friend never returned, the memory still lingers from time to time. Just recently, about 2 months ago, I had another strange encounter. I was driving home from my parents' house late at night on a route connecting New York to Connecticut. My town in Connecticut borders New York State and has some serious hills bordering on small mountains. At one point, the trees thinned out, revealing a large hill clearly visible from different perspectives. That night I noticed 2 large, slow-blinking rectangular lights low in the sky. They moved sluggishly, and I couldn't make out any specific features of a craft around them. From my perspective, they seemed to be only about 20 meters higher than the hilltop. The experience left me wondering what I had really seen. I started my walk home from work, about halfway through my 20-minute journey around 10 p.m. when I spotted two flying objects blinking red and white. At first, I didn't think much of it since I live near an airport. But then I watched them fly toward each other, hover momentarily, and suddenly depart in opposite directions, something I'd never seen drones or planes do before. I began tracking one of these objects, which kept changing speed dramatically, moving quickly, then slowing down and occasionally hovering mid-air. As I followed its trail, two more appeared on the opposite end of the horizon. I started chasing them down, trying to document what I was seeing and take videos. The most unsettling aspects were their unusual movements and distinctive shape. They were just distant enough that I could only discern their form through a horizontal row of blinking lights, 3 on each object. Each set would blink in a consistent pattern, red lights flashing sequentially, followed by a white flash, occurring uniformly every few seconds. During my entire journey around town, at least 5 of these objects were present, while I only witnessed their bizarre movements a few times. I was mostly trailing them as they sped past. The lights seemed fuzzy at the edges and appeared quite large. Moving at a consistent 40 miles per hour, I tracked one object that drifted about a half mile to my left over 2 minutes. The top of a nearby hill, about a mile from the road, provided context for their slow movement, roughly 15 miles per hour. Their blinking was too slow for standard aircraft strobes, on for about 2 seconds, off for 2 more, in a regular rhythm. Both objects moved and blinked in unison, suggesting they were part of a single larger entity. They were positioned approximately 30 to 40 yards apart. Despite always thinking I'd want to follow a UFO if I saw one, an instinctive horror prevented me from getting closer. There was no noticeable sound, and I was the only witness. I hope that next time I'll find the courage to investigate more thoroughly. By stargazing on a Jamaican beach with my siblings, we spotted something unusual. Back in 2011, we spotted something unusual. A single point of light moved in a way that was far from normal circular and figure 8 patterns that resembled a laser pointer guiding a cat's attention. The movements were compact, no larger than the Little Dipper's cup. It was bright and looked like a dimmed star, but its motion was anything but typical. After watching for 15 to 20 minutes, the light simply faded away. Years later, on August 4th, 2019, around 10:15 p.m., another strange encounter occurred. My aunt and I were on the porch when we saw something extraordinary in the sky. Initially, it appeared like an incomplete circle, similar to an eclipsed moon, but definitely not in its usual location. The object was bright yellow with hints of orange-red, almost resembling a fireball. At first we thought it might be a shooting star, but it remained stationary. The light began to flatten and spread out, then shrink into a star-like form before disappearing entirely. Minutes later it reappeared, growing larger and seemingly moving away from its original position. The surrounding light expanded, and then the object started to shrink again, reminiscent of an eclipse's dark portion covering a light source. Suddenly, the light split into 2 and vanished completely. We waited, but it never returned a third time. Despite extensive research, I found no explanations in solar or lunar events that could account for what we witnessed. These weren't regular aircraft. Everything about them was strange. I attempted to capture video, but my camera struggles in low-light conditions. The experience has been haunting, and I'm seeking any insights into these light patterns or potential explanations. My aunt and I had an unusual experience one night that I can't quite explain. We were looking for meteor showers or eclipses. but nothing special was happening in our area. After some searching, we discovered 2 other people had seen something similar just 3 days earlier. My aunt called me outside quickly. A massive aircraft was flying low with what seemed like 4 wings, 2 on each side. It wasn't like typical local planes with small flickering lights. This craft was extraordinary. One side blazed bright red, the other bright green. It approached from the same area where we'd previously noticed mysterious lights. When the plane passed behind our house, I ran to track it. Suddenly it vanished completely. Its size should have kept it visible, but it disappeared instantly. My aunt and I have tried finding a logical explanation, but nothing makes sense. I'm hesitant to suggest aliens, yet I can't imagine what else it could have been. My fascination with UFOs began back in 2008 when I was 13. I compiled a scrapbook filled with UFO pictures, government documents, and newspaper clippings, all sourced from Google. I even recorded my own sightings, but eventually discarded them, feeling like I might be overstepping. Between 2009 and 2011, around ages 14 to 16, I had a remarkable encounter. One evening around 8 or 9 p.m., while scanning the sky, I spotted an incredible sight. A massive triangular object faced west in my backyard. A red light centered its structure, and parts of the craft seemed to morph and shift. The craft's capabilities were mind-blowing. It transformed from triangle to boomerang shape, with sections becoming intermittently invisible. It appeared to have an on and off invisible shield, changing shapes before completely vanishing. Of all my UFO experiences, this remains the most convincing. Recently, strange occurrences have been happening at my house. Not just potential ghostly activities, but concurrent UFO sightings. Around 11:30 at night, while lying in bed, something extraordinary unfolded. I'm sharing these stories hoping others might relate or offer insights into similar experiences. Has anyone else encountered unexplainable aerial phenomena? I'm genuinely curious and would love to hear your stories. I was leaning on the side of my patio door when something caught my eye through the blinds. There, hovering above my neighbor's house, was a glowing object that didn't look like anything ordinary. The craft had a rim with a color-changing rainbow and blinking lights around it. At first, I thought it might be my neighbor's wealthy friend's helicopter, but there was absolutely no sound, which was strange. I couldn't quite explain what I was seeing. It seemed too close to be a star, and if it was a drone, it would have made some noise, especially at such close range. The whole experience left me amazed and confused. Later that night, I heard what sounded like a plane circling my house. The sound seemed almost artificial, as if something was trying to mask its true nature. When I looked back, the craft had disappeared. Another similar incident happened around the same time, again late at night. I was lying in bed, looking out the window, when I saw a white, pulsating light. I was too afraid to investigate, worried it might be something extraterrestrial. These experiences made me want to understand what was happening. I live outside of Melbourne, Australia, and what occurred next was even more bizarre. While on my deck having a smoke, I looked up and saw something unusual in the sky. 3 stars appeared in a precise, evenly spaced formation. One star began moving slowly, blinking as it traveled between the other stars in a pattern no known aircraft or satellite could replicate. I called my partner outside to confirm what I was seeing. Together, we watched this controlled, slow-moving phenomenon. The stars moved with an intentionality that defied explanation. Shortly after, they vanished completely. When I told my housemate about it, he was disappointed to have missed the entire event. I'm now determined to investigate these sightings and understand what I've witnessed. Our small town has an unusual story. 4 people have reported seeing something similar within just 3 months. The incident involved me, and I'll share exactly what happened. I was 13 years old when this occurred, completely sober and clear-headed. I had just returned from a class trip to Washington, D.C., and my father picked me up from the airport around 7 or 8 at night. We were driving home on a highway when something extraordinary caught my attention. The object was a peculiar sight. Gray and steel-colored, it looked both close and far away simultaneously. Its shape was remarkably symmetrical, like a perfectly circular ravioli, with bulges on both sides and a ring of lights. These lights were unique, blue, yellow, and white, all at once, without creating any typical light beam or flare. What made this even more bizarre was how the craft moved. It matched our car's speed exactly, which is incredibly difficult on I-95. The movement was so smooth it almost appeared stationary. I tried getting my father's attention, but our relationship was strained and he dismissively continued driving. The craft's behavior became even more strange. While maintaining its precise alignment with our car, it began tilting on its side, becoming nearly invisible except for its distinct bulges. Then, in a moment I'll never forget, it did something unimaginably precise. It split in half mid-movement. The split was so mechanically perfect that I instantly knew this was not a human-made object. There was no jerking, no hesitation. Just an incredibly smooth division that defied all mechanical logic. Interestingly, my friend and her partner had witnessed almost the exact same thing months earlier. When I called her, she confirmed every detail, including the direction relative to local landmarks. Her partner corroborated the story as well. I was living in a cabin out in the woods with a friend during a tumultuous time in my life. One night around 3 a.m. we had another friend over and were smoking in the backyard when everything changed. A strange humming sound emerged from the woods, growing louder. Suddenly my friend shouted, momentarily blinded by a distant light. Seconds later, another friend pointed out something extraordinary, a see-through object near the treetops roughly 40 meters away. We could actually see the treetops behind its transparent form. We stood in stunned silence as the object spiraled upward at an impossible speed, far beyond any known technological capability. Then it vanished completely. Wanting to verify our shared experience, we rushed inside and had the idea to draw what we saw simultaneously without looking at each other's sketches. When we compared our drawings, they were identical, exact replicas of the same phenomenon. We lamented not recording the event, joking that the light might have scanned us to ensure we had no recording devices. That night, my friend slept upstairs while I remained downstairs. As I lay pondering our incredible encounter, 2 orbs suddenly appeared in the room, one red, one blue. I feigned sleep, watching them float around for about 5 minutes before they disappeared. The next morning, my friends discovered something even more bizarre. The door handle had completely disintegrated, its components inexplicably dismantled. Was it aliens? Advanced unknown technology? I can't say, but the experience rekindled a childlike sense of wonder about the mysteries of our universe. I was 16 when this happened, but the events took place when I was 3 years old in New Zealand. We were driving back from Wellington late at night, around 2:30 in the morning with my parents. We had just passed the RNZAF Air Force Base at Ohakea, and were near a large privacy tree typically found on farms. Suddenly a light began moving slowly along the tree line. My dad initially thought it might be a farmer trimming hedges, but my mom pointed out how unusual it was for such activity at nearly 3 a.m. We pulled over to a rest area to watch. The light stopped moving and started spinning. Another light joined it, spinning in a counterclockwise triangle. Within 2 minutes, a third light appeared seemingly out of nowhere, completing a three-point formation. They would spin, then stop, then spin again. After what felt like an eternity but was actually about 5 minutes, the lights behaved strangely. One abruptly flew straight up at incredible speed and vanished. Another flew off to the right and disappeared. The remaining light resumed spinning, moved along the tree line, and then flew left, disappearing completely. The entire sequence lasted just 15 minutes. We were left amazed and terrified, and to this day we've never witnessed anything similar. My ex-boyfriend's mom, who is from the same reservation, shared some other intriguing stories. There's a bush road that stretches about 45 minutes through the woods, likely an old logging route that locals now simply call the Limit. This area is used for various activities like camping, fishing, skiing, dirt biking, and four-wheeling, typical pastimes in a small town. She had experienced 2 paranormal events on this particular road, which wasn't entirely unusual for the area. My dad's road is known for strange occurrences, but nobody gets too worked up about it. I still drive down that stretch to catch beautiful sunsets. It's just a relaxed kind of place. One story from the 80s involves a bizarre time loop experience. Her cousin and she were heading back from getting water near a natural spring when their car suddenly died. No cell phones existed back then, so they started walking. They had plenty of daylight and weren't far from their destination. In the distance, they spotted another stopped car. Thinking they might get a ride, they approached. As they got closer, something extraordinary happened. The car wasn't just similar, it was identical to their own. Everything inside was exactly as they had left it. Her sweater in the back seat, her cousin's empty pop can. They hadn't turned off the dirt road or walked far enough to reach another trail. Confused but determined, they continued walking. Incredibly, ahead of them sat the same parked car again. Her cousin grabbed a stick from the woods and placed it on the car's hood, creating a test. If they encountered the same situation again, they could check whether the stick remained. They walked on, and the scenario repeated. This time the stick had vanished. She described an overwhelming fear that this time loop might continue indefinitely. But it didn't. The next time they walked, they could progress further and eventually made it back to the reservation. They got help and had the car towed, but never understood what caused this strange phenomenon. The stick's mysterious disappearance remained unexplained. Years later, on the same road, she experienced another unusual event, a UFO sighting with friends. This second story came after the first bizarre incident, happening sometime in the early years that followed. During the late 90s, the summer was alive with an unusual encounter. A group of friends driving around, enjoying music and a few beers, suddenly noticed something strange deep in the woods. White lights were emanating from between the trees, visible but without a clear source. The driver turned down the music, and an eerie silence fell over the car. Everyone felt something wasn't right. A low, almost inaudible humming began, hard to describe but distinctly present. It seemed to ring in their ears, and they all heard it. Suddenly, the light shot directly upward, revealing a UFO. The craft transformed, rotating through various colors right above the tree line before disappearing into the horizon in seconds. The lights continued changing as it moved. This wasn't an isolated incident. The area was known for bizarre experiences. Algonquin folklore creatures, Bigfoot sightings, time loops, and unexplained singing that seemingly approached from nowhere. Adding to the mystery, they recently discovered their entire reservation sits atop a massive uranium deposit, reportedly the largest in the province. Nuclear mining companies persistently attempt to establish mines, but the community consistently refuses. Could this uranium deposit be connected to the numerous paranormal occurrences? another personal UFO sighting occurred, with no phone to capture evidence. Initially mistaken for a glare, the observation happened while Orion's belt and other stars were visible, the moon behind them, creating a surreal backdrop for an unexplained encounter. The experiences on this road are wildly diverse, each story more perplexing than the last. At first I noticed movement in one direction, which ruled out a simple glare. I was definitely heading northward, and with the lockdown in effect, I knew it couldn't be a plane. Commercial flights were extremely limited during this time. I know exactly what planes look and sound like, and this was completely different. The object was silently cruising through the sky. Seconds later, another appeared on the right side. Small dots of light were visible, about the size of stars, but they weren't twinkling. Instead, these lights remained in a fixed alignment and seemed to change angle slightly. I wondered if these could be migrating birds, since flocks sometimes fly in V formations. But that didn't explain the strange glow. The object was definitely flying at a typical airplane altitude, yet far too large to be an aircraft. It cruised for several seconds before completely vanishing. This happened during the summer of 2016, just a few months after my sister was born. My family had some old friends visiting, and my friend Adam and I decided to take a walk to the neighborhood ponds. We stayed out until it was dark enough to see stars. Standing at the end of my driveway, we spotted what initially looked like a moving star. Adam confirmed he saw it too. We watched for about 5 minutes when 2 more stars appeared, moving toward each other at similar speeds. Adam tried recording the event, but his phone camera couldn't capture. The dim lights, just as Adam put his phone away, the object stopped in a blank area of sky, forming a distinct pattern. Before this experience, I was a complete skeptic. Now I'm not so sure. Was this a stealth bomber? Aliens? All I know is it was an unidentified flying object. Something I couldn't explain. I want to understand what we saw that night. These weren't ordinary lights or conventional aircraft. Something extraordinary happened, and I'm still searching for answers. Adam and I were together when we witnessed something extraordinary in the night sky. A large triangular formation of lights began moving as one unit, turning clockwise with a steady, synchronized movement. For nearly 5 minutes, they maintained this precise formation before coming to a sudden stop. Then, in a display of speed I'd never seen before, the lights rapidly separated and vanished into the darkness. Our visible reaction caught the attention of people back at the house. When we tried to explain what we'd seen, they simply dismissed our account. But Adam and I know exactly what we witnessed. Green Cove Springs has a complex history with military and government establishments. Though most compounds are no longer active, significant military infrastructure remains in use as housing and business spaces. This makes me wonder if our sighting might have been related to some sort of test flight. My UFO encounters go back to my childhood. When I was about 11, I was riding home with my dad and spotted a ship outside the car window. It was black and structured like a small city with multiple spires. My dad saw it too, but his reaction was strange. When I tried to discuss it, he became incredibly agitated, screaming that we hadn't seen anything, despite having described the object himself. Years later, around age 34, I had another encounter while working at a hotel. On Veterans Day, a housekeeper called me over and pointed to a white sphere in the sky. We watched as it moved at an incredible speed and suddenly split into 6 smaller spheres. I joked with her about her first UFO sighting, suggesting it was probably just observing the parade. Interestingly, when I asked her about the incident later, she had the same extreme reaction as my father, complete denial and panic, as if her mind couldn't process what she'd seen. My most recent encounter happened while letting my dogs out at night. I noticed a star that seemed larger and different from the others. As I observed it more closely, I realized it was a four-pointed star with multiple distinct points. Each of these experiences left me with more questions than answers, but one thing remains certain. Something extraordinary is out there. Nut pressure cooker glowing with pulsing colors caught my eye, so I tried something telepathy. Not the fancy cross-legged meditation type, just thinking like you would about a grocery list. My first thought was simple. Do you mean any harm? I signaled for a response. Red appeared, meaning no. Then I asked another question. Did you come from the stars? Green lit up. Curious, I probed further. Are you here just for reconnaissance? Another green confirmed my suspicion. When I felt satisfied with our silent communication, I mentally told it, "You can go now." Immediately it rose higher, moving farther away. Here's the key thing. Stay calm. I know this might sound strange, but staying composed is crucial if you want to remember what you've witnessed. Nothing more. No missing time, no strange markings. Just something out of the ordinary that caught my attention.